YouTube. You know, I was very much against using YouTube as a streaming service because it's so convoluted how they do this, but it's been really good recently. Let me close this. And let me close this. And this. And this. Let me go to my favorite website in the world, therot.com. TheTherot.com. The one and only. Paul, can you do me a favor? Could you center yourself a little?
What?
Can you get your chakras in order, Paul?
I can't move this because I do 7 other podcasts every week. What do you mean?
No. Like, I just like sit straight so I could get you in the shot, so I could adjust it. There we go.
Okay.
I'm gonna move you this way. There we go. Perfect.
Turn off this thing. I gotta take down this stupid brick thing.
You don't like it?
I don't know.
It's just a piece of cloth, right? Or a piece of plastic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a...
Did you take apart the other stuff that you had at the old house?
Not entirely. I mean, the faux wall and the little corner piece are still there, or were still there. I don't know.
All right, let me do that. We got this.
3.
Down a hair.
How hard that would be. Hold on one second. Let me turn this off for a second.
Hey, Greg, in our chat. All right. Hey, all right. Paul is fixing something. While he does that, let's see the notes here.
Oh, that's on my... What is that? That's weird. Is it just a little... Mm-hmm.
There we go. Ah, look at that. You're like in a different world now.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'm good to start. How about you?
Yep.
All right. Let me just close this one out. Let's open up the chat room. Did I tweet this? Let me tweet that we're live.
Windows. Who cares?
One here. One here. And we're live. Okay, perfect. All right. And we could begin in 3, 2, and a 1. What the Tech is brought to you by Warby Parker and their free home try-on program. Order 5 pairs of glasses and try them on for 5 days. There's no obligation to buy, ships free, and it includes a prepaid return shipping label. Head on over to warbyparker.com/GFQ to order your free home try-ons today. Cybercrime is all over the news. Hackable, an original podcast from McAfee, answers the question, how worried should I really be? Listen on all major platforms, including Apple Podcasts, and learn if your personal devices put you to risk. Listen and subscribe to Hackable wherever you get your podcasts. And buy Netgear. When was the last time you upgraded your home's Wi-Fi? Turn your Wi-Fi up a notch with Netgear's new line of Nighthawk Wi-Fi 6 routers. Whether you're gaming online or watching Netflix in 4K, you'll enjoy buffer-free streaming with zero lag, no matter how many devices you're connecting to the network. To get more information, go to netgear.com/Wi-Fi 6. Make your Wi-Fi feel young again. Everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian. Of course, I'm joined by the one, the only Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm good. I got so much feedback over last week's show. A lot of positive compliments. People really enjoyed the discussion.
Well, that's unusual.
that is unusual.
How did that happen?
I guess we did something positive. I guess we did it. We had a really good conversation last week on the show, so people enjoyed it. I got the most internet style compliment, and it was, listen, you guys aren't the best tech show, but you guys are pretty real.
I saw that. I saw that.
Yeah. I think, you know what? I'll take it.
That's some good feedback. You're not very good, but I appreciate the fact that you're not fake.
Yeah, it wasn't, I'll take it as a compliment. Guys, we have a lot to talk about today. I have a lot of questions for Paul. I have some viewer emails that I kind of wanted to, I went down and I'm like, oh, you know what? A couple of these questions are good for Paul. So I'm going to throw them his way and talk about a number of other stuff. Paul, what do you have going on? Anything before we start the show?
What do you mean?
Are you performing at Ha-Ha's this coming Sunday or?
Oh, no, I'm going to be home for a little while.
You got to be home.
So I mean, you never know, but I don't think I have any travel until I go away for the summer.
But you're going away soon, right? A couple of weeks.
About 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
Oh my God, maybe 2 weeks.
I think it is 2 weeks.
3 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I don't know. 2-3 weeks. Middle of July.
Middle of July, and then Paul, where in Europe are you going this time?
Amsterdam.
With the whole family, or just you and Steph?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, this is the home swap. We're going to be gone for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's great that everybody goes. I want to dive right into this with you. A lot of news and somewhat speculation over the foldable Surface that we discussed quite a few months ago.
Yeah.
What was it, like a month and a half ago we were talking about this?
Yeah, it comes up every so often. Yeah.
There's more news coming out from this. And you had a great article on Thurrott.com, which I advise everybody to go. Actually, you had a number of great articles. One, which is another topic that I want to talk about. It was your Bill Gates article. It was a premium article.
Yep.
I think that was a great perspective of this, which we'll talk about. But I want to get your opinion on this foldable Surface that possibly will be running Android apps.
Yep. I don't think that there was any actual new news. I think that the publication that wrote that collated a bunch of stuff from other sources. I don't think they heard anything themselves, but this is, part of a long running series and evolving series of rumors that Microsoft is working on both a software platform and a hardware device of some kind that will be either 2 screens or a folding screen or something like that.
But the biggest story here, right? This is in tune with the Windows Lite, and I'm using air quotes for people who are listening, for lack of a better term, right? Or Windows Core OS. This story, forget about the foldable tablet, right? We're going to get those. We know that's happening. There's going to be nothing special about that aspect to me, but the bigger thing here is this lighter weight Windows that will possibly use Android applications as its app in its app store.
I
There's
mean,
a big story
we'll
here.
see. Yeah, we'll see what form that takes. I mean, so we have to speculate because we really don't have that many details. I mean, what I will say, we know that Microsoft is working on some Windows-based platform that we're right now is kind of called Light OS. That's probably not going to be the name, but it's a better name. It was Windows Light at one point. I don't think they're going to call it Windows anything. I think that'd be a huge mistake. I think they realize that.
Yeah.
And it's basically another attempt to do what Windows RT and with Windows 10s mode both tried to do, which was evolve Windows into a simpler platform where you could not install third-party desktop applications from the web, right?
Yeah.
They want this iOS-style insular platform. And, there are a lot of problems with this scheme, but I mean, the big ones are that the previous versions of the system looked like Windows, and that made users believe that it was Windows, right? Which it was, but it couldn't run desktop apps, and so there was some confusion there. And then there's the whole notion of Microsoft's got this big, heavy 35-year-old operating system with tons of legacy code in it, and how do you make that thing kind of thin, light, and mobile and modern? And it's kind of a hard transition to make without leaving.
They tried it, right, with Windows 8.
Yeah, they keep trying.
To an
They keep
extent.
trying. I mean, you could go back even further than that. I mean, one of the primary architectural goals of Longhorn and of Windows Vista was to componentize the operating system to make it possible to do what Microsoft has been doing lately, which is you build different products off of the same core. Today they call that Core OS, as the core component, the core central component of Windows, and then they build Windows 10 off of that. They build the Surface Hub software off of that. They build Xbox One off of that. They used to build Windows Phone off of that. They have embedded versions of Windows that get built off of that, and so forth. So this has been an effort, that spanned many, many, many years. So, here we are again. It's 2019. We're still talking about it.
We're back
still,
to it. I know.
We'll see.
Well, I mean, that's going to be a problem that Microsoft is facing, will face forever, because they have a tremendous user base of their software, right, of Windows.
Yeah.
Nearly everybody has used Windows at some point.
Right.
And you have to constantly support enterprise. You have to constantly support outdated hardware and software. It's not an easy task for them as it would be for Apple. And we saw Apple do it, right? Apple turned around and like, hey, by the way, OS 9? Yes, sorry, guys.
Well, I mean, so Microsoft has had some experience making this kind of architectural shift, right? So they had made something called Windows NT, which was not based on the same code base as Windows, which is based on DOS. And eventually they combined those two things into a single product, which is a cute way of saying eventually they just went with NT. Primarily what they brought over from the DOS Windows side was driver compatibility, which was a huge problem in the NT days. But, they made them look the same. They co-developed them side by side. They released different versions of each. The system requirements for the bigger, heavier thing kind of came down as computers got more powerful anyway. And eventually NT was okay, and that's fine, when you're scaling up. I think the thing that Apple did, so Apple did that too, right? That's the OS 9 to OS 10 change, or they were probably in a OS 7 or 8 or whatever it was at the time, but
whatever it was, yeah.
When they started, but that was the same exact kind of shift. The one thing that Apple has done successfully that Microsoft hasn't done is take that big, heavy operating system and turn it into something thin and light and mobile, put it into a phone and have it actually work, right? That's what the iPhone was. The iPhone was based on OS 10. And, they stripped out everything they could strip out. They had to develop some new frameworks, for mobile related to touch and all of the stuff you want to do on a phone that you would never do on a Mac. But they did it. I mean, of course, it runs on a different platform. The MacOS 10 at the time, just like NT codebase, is designed to be cross-platform. That's how they switched to Intel, by the way, as well, because again, it was always designed to be, to work that way. It's why they will probably switch to their own A series chips at one point on the Mac as well. But anyway,
it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think so. But the problem for Microsoft, I mean, there's a lot of problems here. I mean, they have a platform that's used by 1.5 billion people. It's ostensibly popular. I guess on that note, you could call that popular. It's aging infrastructure. It's lots of security issues related to that. There's lots of legacy code that most people don't use, or different users use different parts of the system, and it's they want to modernize it. It's completely understandable. They don't have a big mobile play other than mobile computers, right? I mean, there isn't some future where they make a popular phone platform and it explodes off into the next big thing. I mean, I think you could look at, well, no, I mean, actually, I probably said it this way before. I think the best that Microsoft can hope for is to temporarily reverse the slide in the PC market and slow down the slide over time, because eventually these types of devices just become less and less important, to most people.
Yeah, I mean, if we're forecasting, what the future holds for the PC market, we
Mhm.
could kind of see the trajectory that it's going. So you're right. If they lessen the blow a little bit and they
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
level
Yeah.
it out for more, they get more longevity. But let's talk about the concept of implementing Android applications. This
Yeah.
was, I mean, it's actually sadly hysterical. And this will go into our Bill Gates conversation. Sadly
Sure.
hysterical because
Yeah.
this could have been an unbelievable, you know, way to launch Windows Phone, years ago.
Yeah.
The problem with Windows Phone was not the device. The devices were great for the time. I
Mhm.
mean, I had Lumias, multiple
Yep.
Lumias, and I loved them. By the way, Rob Greenlee just
Yep.
gave up his Lumia. But did you hear that?
Jeez.
He just
No,
gave up his Windows Phone.
I don't understand why anyone would hold on to it for that long, but
He held
okay.
on for it for a very,
Rob, welcome
very
to the
long
21st
time.
century.
Our friend Rob,
Yep.
our friend Rob has now entered into the 21st century with an iPhone. But I think visiting the whole story of Windows Phone,
Yeah.
a couple years from now, with Microsoft's initiative, implementing Android apps and a foldable Surface and who knows what else.
Yep.
It's going to be a very different story we're going to tell about this experiment that was Windows Phone if this works. If this gains any kind of traction or popularity within its
I
core
don't.
user base.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't. I don't think this is that big of a deal, to be honest. I mean, the problem is Android is not Microsoft's platform. So if Android takes off on some Microsoft device or whatever, then it really just proves the entire futility of what they're doing. I mean, Android
Yeah.
has not taken off on tablets. It's not taken off in any meaningful way on Chromebooks. Android is only popular on phones, and it's really popular on phones, except in the United States, where
Yeah.
in the United States it has like 50% market share instead of 90% or 80% or whatever the worldwide bit is. But I don't know. Android is a Windows size problem for Google because it's kind of a one-hit wonder. The stuff that they've tried to build off of Android by and large has not succeeded. I mean, there are some minor successes, like Google Assistant, obviously, but their Android thing never worked. Android and tablets never worked. Android TV never worked.
Android
They've
TV still doesn't work.
yeah. Well, in the sense that it
It's-
doesn't, isn't popular. So, and then, but you want to push that forward to, now Microsoft's going to use it. It's like, okay, but great. So I don't know. I mean, I will say for people who are interested in a Microsoft 2-screen or folding screen, ultra mobile kind of ARM-based device that gets great battery life, et cetera, there is some appeal to Android apps, right? Because otherwise, all it's going to run are store apps and web apps, right? And
Yeah.
so you can add the support for a popular mobile platform. It's a little tougher because Microsoft doesn't own that platform, and we'll see how that works out. I mean, maybe they become a Android licensee and they provide the Google Play Store in there, so you can get Android apps. That will make the device a little confusing because now we'll have 3 different places to get apps. But we'll see what they do. I don't know how they're going to handle that. But
So I want to turn this conversation
mhm.
to the phone side a little bit.
Okay.
I want to speculate a little bit. I enjoy speculating with you, Paul. It's
Okay.
one of the few people that I could speculate with about technology.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of people in my life that I talk about tech on a regular basis. You're one of those people.
Yeah.
Before
I'm
we
so sorry.
continue, I'm so sorry. Before we continue, I want to thank our great sponsor, and that's Text Expander. You've heard me talk about these guys for a while. Give your productivity a boost with Text Expander. Turn the things that you type into snippets. And the way that this works, this makes my time is very, important to me, and I'm constantly sending out similar emails each and every day. I'm constantly putting out tweets. I know every Tuesday. What I've done, I've made shortcuts and I've made tags for certain things that I do that are just constant. If I'm writing, like, what the tech is live, I'll just have a shortcut. If I do WTT, I'm able to send that tweet out immediately. This has been great also for customer support, reports, emails, anything that you need. It's phenomenal because you could database everything with shortcuts. So if you know that I'm emailing Paul every Tuesday and I got to constantly copy and paste the same thing, I'm able to just do it this way, which is great. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more about Text Expander. This is made by the guys over at SmileSoft. So it's a great company with great people behind it. Highly recommend it. I absolutely love it, and they're giving our viewers 20% off their first year. Text Expander is available on macOS, Windows, iPhone, iPad, Chrome. The list goes on and on, as you can see, and it's a great piece of software. Textexpander.com/podcast. I want to turn this conversation on the phone side. Do you think with Microsoft exploring at this level with Windows integration with Android applications, and they're more of an open mentality when it comes to other software, does this give more fire to the argument that we will get another mobile device by Microsoft, another phone by Microsoft?
No, but no, we're not going to see a Windows phone, if that's what you mean. There is a chance that Microsoft could release could sign up with a third party like an HMD type company and release a Microsoft branded Android smartphone, right? That would be preloaded with its software.
Yeah.
You could see that. That would be a relatively low cost enterprise, for Microsoft. They're not building factories to build phones. They're not hiring phone designers, and they'd basically, hire that out to a third party company. And I know, I do know, I can state with the utmost of certainty, based on discussions I've had with people very high up at Microsoft, that there are discussions about doing just that. But I wouldn't put too much hope into such a thing. Microsoft would be, just like the Surface products are, yet another PC maker. They make great PCs. They move a little slowly, adopting new technologies. They haven't had great success innovating with form factors other than their first initial, tablet form factor 2-in-1. I don't think they would have any better success in the phone market. They're not going to, even Google doesn't see much success in the phone market. So I don't know, what the point of that would be, other than to somewhat control its destiny with regards to, this is what a Microsoft phone should look like. And maybe that's something they could see some success in enterprises, perhaps. But I don't know. I wouldn't get too excited by such a thing.
Yeah, I think there is room for excitement if they were to take that plunge like that. I'm not saying, Windows, their own operating system or anything like that. They could, essentially add a launcher, a really nice Microsoft-esque launcher on an Android, and have hardware that kind of is uniform with what they're currently putting out there on their hardware side. And now that's just another piece.
We have a lot of those things already, though. There are, Huawei has its own launcher and its own style, when it comes to software and hardware. OnePlus does the same thing. They have their own launcher. Samsung does the same thing. Google doesn't. Google has, Google makes Android. They have stock Android, whatever. They have a certain style, certainly, for their phones. But I don't think the world's clamoring for a Microsoft phone. I know some Microsoft enthusiasts are, but it's the type of thing you can piece together yourself today. If you really want that, you can put the Android launcher on any phone. You can add the SwiftKey keyboard. You can add all of Microsoft software. You can use Cortana as your digital assistant. You can on and on and on. You can do everything you want. But I don't think a lot of people do any of that, frankly. Yeah. I don't really think there's a lot of that.
I think I'm curious. What was did we ever get final sale numbers about how many of those, how many Windows phones Microsoft sold in its entire
Yeah,
lifespan?
yeah.
Or
I
I
don't
guess from
remember the
Windows.
numbers off the top of my head. I mean, but yes, Microsoft did. Um, when it owned Lumia, it would reported quarterly sales for sure.
I got to find what the total numbers were.
Like the total number?
Yeah, total devices sold.
I don't know. I
I
mean,
just got one for Palm.
yeah.
So because I was curious
Well,
about.
it's a different age, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I've been reading these old books about Microsoft, and in 1990, if I remember off the top of my head, like OS 2 sold like 1 million copies, and it was considered a big deal. And Windows 3.0 or something sold 3 million copies. It was like the best-selling version of Windows ever. By the time Windows 7 came around, they were selling 20 million copies of Windows a quarter.
Wow.
So, the world got a lot bigger,
Yeah.
you know. And when you look at mobile, I mean, the market that Palm would have played in, which was mostly PDAs, and then the beginning of the smartphone era, the market for that stuff was pretty small. Um, but today it's well, every year it's was it 1.2 billion sold a year, and total addressable market of north of 2.5 billion, something like that. It's
It's a
big.
lot. It's not a little. Let's talk about this Bill Gates interview.
Hmm. Okay.
I know that you were a little critical of him. So go. Why don't you go
Well, no,
into?
no, 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 no. I'm a lot critical of him. Bill
Yeah.
Gates is a terrible human being, and people need to understand that, because I think to a younger audience, he's like this goofy older philanthropist guy who's given away his billions, which is great. But I don't mean to over dramatize this, but this is almost like, what if the Nazis had won World War II and had cured cancer? Would that have made it okay? I mean, obviously he didn't commit genocide. I don't mean it like that, but
Yeah.
but he was a terrible human being, and it is unbelievable how ruthless that company was when he ran it, and how many businesses he destroyed. And by the way, you can get an idea. Like I said, I've been researching older stuff about Microsoft lately because I'm writing a series of articles about programming for Windows and how it changed over the years, and how what changed with the programming part of Windows reflects on what was going on in the world, and vice versa. So it's really interesting when you go back to like 1989 to 1992 or three or whatever. And you can either read about this in books like Gates by Stephen Manis, or you can read magazines like the Internet Archive has incredible resources of older magazines, including
Mhm.
Byte magazine. And Byte magazine is particularly interesting because it was so humongous back in the day. I think there were issues that were like over 500 pages. Like, this thing came out 13 times a year, and mostly it was ads, right? And the ads are fascinating. You can see the rise and fall of software companies, famous and not famous, all of which eventually succumbed to Bill Gates and Microsoft, right? And they did that thing that we today associate with Apple, which is, there's a good idea out in the world, and Apple will steal it, and they'll just put it into their own product, right? We talk about this all the time. Microsoft used to do that back then, and if they saw anything they thought was a threat to Windows or to MS-DOS back in the day or whatever it was, they would just make an announcement and say, "Hey, we're working on this thing," and it would make whatever the other guys were doing pointless, because no
Yeah.
one would invest in that company anymore or even worry
Yeah,
about it,
because
because
it's
Microsoft was
integrated
just
in
going
the
to.
operating system. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just like think like off the top of my head. This is going to be semi pointless, but most people have heard of companies like Lotus and WordPerfect, right? Novell, um, Borland, but there are smaller companies too, right? Ashton Tate, it was in the day wasn't that small. Or Digital Research, right? The company that created CPM, which was stolen by Microsoft and turned
Mhm.
into MS DOS, right? Um, and there's just a million of these kind of examples. Go
Oh,
Computing, the
it's
company.
so many. It's so many.
It's just astonishing. And so this stuff gets kind of lost in the mists of time. The people today kind of forget it. I mean, the original, so um, Xerox Park, for some reason, invited Apple to come and look at the innovations they were making in graphical user interfaces,
That's amazing.
and they did. Oh, and by the way, I should say, the innovations they were making in graphical user interfaces, networking, and object-oriented programming. But the graphical user interface stuff was so amazing to Steve Jobs. He didn't even see the other stuff. And he ran back to Apple and said, we need to copy this immediately, which they did. And they created, well, first the Lisa and then the Mac. Microsoft, because the Lisa failed, Apple worked with outside parties to try to get software going on the Mac. And one of the companies at the time that was big on programming languages and starting to be a little bit big on application programs was Microsoft. And Microsoft actually helped Apple create some of the user interfaces in the Mac, which a lot of people don't know. They helped define the dialogues, what those look like, certain UI elements like bullet, I don't know if it's bullet lists or like list boxes and things, little widgets you have in the UI. And Bill Gates got as excited by the GUI as Steve Jobs did. And he's like, we got to make something like this. And so they came up with this thing called Interface Builder. Eventually it became called Windows. It took them 2 years to get it. Well, they didn't get it right. It took them 2 years to ship it, but eventually they shipped this thing that it didn't just like steal the look of the Mac. It actually had code from the Mac in it, which another thing a lot of people don't know. And a lot of, like court cases went back and forth. Windows improved over time. It eventually became viable. And of course, it eventually beat the Mac as well. But I mean, going back as far as the beginnings of the company, BASIC, a language that Microsoft did not invent, right? Creating it for the first microcomputers, at least seeing that as being important, and then porting it to everything. Operating systems, they did not invent MS-DOS. They stole it from CP/M. Windows, they stole from the Mac, which I know was stole from Xerox. I mean, it kind of goes on and on and on. Like it's like the bully wins. It's like the worst movie ever made, And for me, as a personal technology enthusiast growing up in the world in the 1980s, I had nothing but disgust for Microsoft. I wanted nothing. I thought their products were substandard, and I thought they were.
Yeah, you were a big Amiga fan. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to understand, I was using a computer in.
Rightfully so. The Amiga had, at the time, I mean, it was actually graphically, their graphical interface was by far ahead.
Oh, they had, yeah. I mean, look, there are real innovations that occur in the world, right? I'm going to get this one a little bit wrong, but one of the guys from Apple the guy who designed a lot of the base level UI stuff for the Mac, Bill Atkinson, I believe he was one of the people that went to Xerox PARC, but whether or not he witnessed this himself, he understood that the system that Xerox had created did certain things technically with regards to Windows overlapping other Windows and whatnot. And as it turns out, they had never figured that out, but he did because he was a genius. And so the Mac did some stuff that it was just software rendering, but really amazing for the day, that Xerox had not figured out. So he improved on it, like that stuff that does occur over time. The Amiga was the first mainstream computer, we'll call it, to do something that today is very common, which is just to have multiple processors that all do different things.
Let me ask you, I'm gonna throw an Amiga question for you. You probably know this. I a couple months ago, I went down this rabbit hole about why Amiga failed. Obviously, it was Commodore and everything. It's a great story how it failed.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that their peak sales were in 1992.
Like unit sales.
Unit sales, yeah. And
there's a great book. It's long out of print called The Home Computer Wars, and what it's really about is the 8-bit computers that dominated the early age of personal computing, right? And for example, the IBM PC, when that came out in 1981, IBM had wanted it to use some kind of an 8-bit processor. It was actually Bill Gates who convinced them to go 16 bits and shoot for the future. But the 8-bit computers of the day, Commodore had the consumer market, the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64, and then the 128, or Atari had the 400 and 800, and then the XL line and the XE line later. There were TI 94, 94A. There was, Timex Sinclair, which was actually a UK product. It was all kinds of different things. All basically 8-bit computers. They're all limited to usually 64K at the most. Obviously the 128 and some of the Atari computers could use more, but that whole world, by the time that concluded, by the time 16-bit computing took off with the Mac, with the IBM PC, with the Amiga, with the Atari ST, Commodore won. They won. That was there was a period of time where no one had sold as much as anything as Commodore had sold the Commodore 64. I think the Toyota Corolla eventually surpassed it or something like that. But
Is that true?
there
I
were
didn't know that.
for a time, and now I'm
Yeah.
sure that's long out of date now. The iPhone is sold in numbers that don't make sense of anything. But back in the day, like through the 1990s or the 2000s, I mean, the Commodore 64 was like the best-selling computer model of all time, or something like that. The Amiga never sold well compared to the Commodore 64. I mean, but neither did anything else they did since then. Commodore released the Commodore 16, the Commodore Plus 4, the Commodore 128, the 128D. They did the Amiga, which had 500, 600, 1000, 2000, 2500, 3000, 4000, whatever all the models were. None of them sold as well. That was their Windows moment, right? That was like the apex for them, was the Commodore 64. So that was just the reality of that era, I guess. I mean, but they outsold Atari and they outsold Apple by a wide margin. The thing was that the Commodore 64 by the end of its life was selling for $99.
Yeah.
And the Apple II at that time, it was at an Apple II GS, which was selling for $2,600 or something. Like, it was a completely different kind of market.
So we almost every kid I knew had a Commodore sitting somewhere in their house. I mean, that's just how it was.
Yeah, I taught myself to program on the Commodore 64. I mean, it was a big thing. I mean, I loved it.
So here's I want to kind of revisit this whole Bill Gates.
I'm sorry, we're talking about going down a rabbit hole.
You know what?
Yeah, where are we? I can't remember what we were talking.
You know what though? It's not your fault. It's mine. I really enjoy. I always describe this to people.
But we were talking about Bill Gates and why he's so terrible.
Yeah.
so we should just wrap that up. So
yeah,
I'm reminded of this stuff because, again, like I said, I've been researching stuff for this series of articles. So I have gone through I would say about 6 years worth of Byte magazines. And I got to tell you, if you're nostalgic at all for like the early computer stuff, I mean, I could sit there and almost cry looking at these things. Like, I'm fascinated by the articles. I'm fascinated by the ads. There are the computer companies like that, have persisted to this day. There are Intel ads in there. This Dell computer comes alive at this time and starts advertising. And then there's computer companies, I'm going to forget most of them, like Northgate, I think was the name of one. There's a million of these companies. They had huge, splashy, multi-page ads, beautiful looking system configurations and everything. And they just didn't make it. I'm sure they were swallowed up by other companies, et cetera, whatever happened. But it's a very fascinating glimpse of the past. There's also like these little news blurby things. It'll be like a little paragraph, like a tiny company up in, Redmond, Washington has announced, or whatever. There's little goofy things like that, depending on the year. And things like I had kind of forgotten about. There was a third-party word processor called Ami. It was, I believe that was the name of the company as well. It was made by a company. And I haven't looked this up yet, but off the top of my head, thinking about it, it was like the greatest word processor in the world in the early days of Windows. I believe it was bought by Lotus, and I think it became part of their suite of applications that included, 1, 2, 3, and some presentation package and blah, blah, blah. And very briefly, they competed with Microsoft Office, right? Like that. I think that became the Lotus word processor. That's what I remember. And then, of course, other companies like Novell, which eventually bought WordPerfect, and Borland, which bought Ashton Tate. I think that's right. But those guys combined to make a suite of productivity applications that they combined their two companies worth of products into one thing, so people could buy a suite of applications to compete with Microsoft Office. And those companies and those products are all gone. They're gone. And they were among the biggest companies, tech companies in the world at the time. Like, they're just gone. And when this stuff resonates today, because we're having discussions right now, and the antitrust regulators in the United States government right now are looking at whether companies like Apple and Google and Facebook and Amazon are doing exactly what Microsoft did, which is to ride the success of one product illegally to get other products into the market and shut out competition. They're all doing it. They're doing exactly what Microsoft did, all of them. And, this behavior is, it might be unavoidable. Microsoft was always a very scrappy kind of startup company. It was kind of lean and mean, and it kind of ran really fast and never looked back. It would release stuff as soon as it could, and it would never fix any problems. It just kept going, going, going. And it was Gates was always worried about the competition and someone usurping him and someone getting bigger than him in one area or whatever it was. And that kind of culture, that mentality or whatever was what drove Microsoft. And that was all very fine until it became a monopoly, right? Then that's when that becomes illegal. This is the same behavior, by the way, that dogged Apple. I mean, during the Steve Jobs years, they were very much an underdog. This is a company that was about to go out of business. And they ran small teams, mean, ragged, lean, and they saw great success, and they didn't stop behaving the same way. They're just this belligerent monopolist. I mean, they're terrible in many ways, really. It's the same problem, So anyway, the Gates story is that somebody I don't know why, if this was tied to something, but somebody asked him, what's your biggest mistake you ever made? And he never, I don't think he actually ever said Windows Phone, if you actually listen to it.
That haircut.
But what the haircut, the glasses. That Loverboy shot where he's like laying across the computer. He might have rethought that one if he could.
Terrible.
No, he said we should have been Android. He said there was always going to be another, like Apple and then someone else. We should have been the someone else. And that is the dumbest freaking thing I think that guy has ever said.
Is he talking about mobile or just Microsoft in general?
He's talking about mobile.
Mobile, okay.
Mobile.
So
because Microsoft in general, that they were that, right, in the PC era.
Yeah.
What he's saying is we should have done that in mobile. And it's not hard to argue why that would be so. Mobile is an order of magnitude bigger than PC. So they would have, he's saying, if we had done that, we would have been the technology company today, not a leading technology.
So to kind of let's revisit Bill Gates and even Ballmer, right? They were those guys in mobile. Windows Mobile was extremely dominant.
I touch on that, and the funny thing is, there was a time period where Windows Mobile was in fact the #1 mobile operating system in the world, and it was a smartphone operating system. It was competing against companies like Nokia and RIM, which made BlackBerry, and also all the other ones. Palm and Motorola was in there, and whoever else. But people look. The iPhone's a tough one because the iPhone changed everything, right? Everything screeched to a halt and everything changed. And you can see the ripple effects. It's like a tsunami or an earthquake, I guess, or whatever, but you can see the ripple effects all over technology.
It was a disruptor. It changed.
Yeah.
It changed
Android was going to come out and be yet another phone OS with a tiny screen and a hardware keyboard, and Google said nope. And they delayed things a bit, and they copied iOS or iPhone OS or whatever it was called at the time, the iPhone. Windows 8 jumped off of a cliff and jumped a shark, I guess maybe is the better term, and added, touch first user interfaces and everything. Microsoft didn't respond very well or very quickly to the iPhone at first. When they eventually got their act together, arguably it was too late. And arguably their ideas were a little too user-centric, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but they were brand hostile. And so, it was kind of a problem.
I'm just looking back at the opportunities that they had. With Apple, and we say this all the time, I don't think any company at that moment knew or could project what Apple was going to do to the market.
Nobody.
And I talk about this all the time. I talk about this all the time. I found an email chain between me and 3 of my friends. I mean, we're going back to the iPhone release, leading up to the iPhone release, and we were joking at how they're not going to be able to do anything. At the time, I think the partner was Singular, right? Before the AT&T. So they were partnering with Singular, which wasn't, especially like in New York, for example, in a major market, it was terrible. We were joking about that. We were talking about, why would anybody want an Apple phone? Why would somebody want to spend so much money? I bet it's going to be really expensive. I bet it's going to be this. And you know what? We were all wrong. We didn't have the foresight at the time to understand what this could possibly do to the UI, the UI could do to the entire mobile market, because I was a Palm Trio guy.
Right. That's the thing. So people underrated the iPhone in the same way that they later underrated the iPad, um, because of their experience with previous things. The iPhone was not the first smartphone. It wasn't the first smartphone to have a mobile store and apps and stuff. Um, but they brought together a lot of things into a single package in a way that had never been done before, and it was in very typical Apple fashion. It was very elegant and well done, and even though there were definitely things they had to fix for the second year, enterprise support, copy and paste, I think was part of it. The App Store itself, lots of things, but the sum of what they created in that first thing was so incredible. It's just kind of, it's kind of amazing. I mean, my initial reaction to the iPad was that it was a scaled up iPod Touch, and I didn't quite see the point of it. And part of the reason for that was I had years of experience with tablet PCs, and I had a kind of it's almost like a bias, an experience bias, because I had experience with this one thing. And so if it doesn't have this thing, it's not going to make any sense. Like if the iPhone doesn't have a great hardware keyboard, like that thing you might have used, like the Palm Treo or the BlackBerry or whatever device. Yeah. It's never going to make it, you know? It's, I don't know. I mean, Apple, there was some magical things that had to come together for the iPhone to make sense. And obviously a lot of it worked. So, like I said, it just changed everything.
I want to continue this discussion, but before we continue, I want to take a moment and talk about a new sponsor and a sponsor that I'm absolutely loving, and it's Hackable. It's a podcast. Paul, we spoke about this last week. Did you check them out yet?
I have not. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think you should. They do a great job at this. It's an original podcast from McAfee, and it answers the question, how worried should I really be when it comes to your security on your phones and on your laptops and things like that. We possess this amazing technology in our pocket or in our purse, and we leave it vulnerable all the time. And people they don't even know, from high profile data breaches that they discuss to ransomware to cyber crimes. This is a great show that tackles all of this. I like to describe it as Mr. Robot meeting Mythbusters. You can find this podcast on all the major platforms, including Apple Podcasts. Look up Hackable on all major podcast platforms. I'll give you a great example of how vulnerable we really are. A friend of ours, Paul, she's a very well-known food blogger. Okay?
Yes.
She called me in a panic. This is a couple days ago. This is a true story. She calls me in a panic. She goes, I effed up really bad. I go, what happened? I could have swore I thought something bad happened. She goes, well, it did. She goes, I got a phone call from support for this software company that I had purchased like 2 years ago to remove something from, by the way, her Mac, right? Her Mac. She got a virus. That's what I'm using the term virus loose. I don't know what she had. So she got socially engineered to give this company money to put, software on her phone. This is on her laptop, and this was years ago. They call her back, and they tell her that if she doesn't give them money right now, she's going to. They need to fix the problem in her computer, and she's like, okay, what do I have to do? She goes, all right, install TeamViewer. They installed TeamViewer on her computer. They logged in. Yeah. They did all this stuff. And about 30 minutes into this, she panicked and she goes, oh my God, what did I just do? And hangs up on them. But at this point, it's done. They did what they did.
Yep.
And this is someone that kind of is aware that these kind of things happen. And she just got fooled. Point and simple.
So what did she lose?
She lost access to that Mac. She had to take it to Apple. She ended up... Yeah. By the way, this was great for Apple. She bought a brand new MacBook Pro.
Okay.
She ended up buying a brand new MacBook Pro in the Apple Store while they fix it. Essentially, they locked her computer and demanded money to open it back up.
I understand the scam. I'm just curious, like what they...
I don't know. I don't know beyond that. I'm like, listen, just shut off the thing, disconnect it from the network, turn it off.
Yeah.
I can't help you because I there was no way I wasn't around. But she took it to Apple and she ended up buying a new Mac and they cleaned it up. I don't know what they did exactly,
Right.
but these are things that happen all the time, and it's fascinating to see how vulnerable everybody is if you're not if you're not paying attention 100%. Great podcast called Hackable, available everywhere podcasts are available. I wanted to talk about it last week when we discussed it.
She
She
should
was
have
so
listened to the
mad.
podcast.
She should have listened to the podcast. She would have known. She's like, I'm
Yep.
such an effing idiot. She goes, I gave this guy, I let him log into my computer.
I know, that's just so
I'm
dumb.
like, I'm like, you
It's
know
just
what's
stupid.
funny? I go, you're apprehensive if I'm trying to trouble support. I'm like, hey, do you have TeamViewer on there? And you're like, I don't want you in my computer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and you let some random guy in India
Sure.
log in there.
Or Russia or Romania.
Or Russia or whatever. And she goes, yep, I'm an idiot. I go, yep. So we were on the subject of phones and Microsoft.
Were we?
We were. Yeah, by the
Oh,
way, she got
boy.
scammed twice. People are saying in the chat room, how did she get scammed twice? Because the first time she thought it was legitimate.
Right.
She bought a new computer because she was in the Apple store and they're pretty. So she bought a new one. So anyway.
Maybe Apple should do this scam. That's a good way to get someone to buy a new computer.
Maybe they are. Maybe that's the conspiracy.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be quite the conspiracy? You
Yeah.
love those kind of stories. It's really Apple.
It's been Apple all along.
Mm-hmm.
The guy removes
The
his
shadow
mask.
government.
It's just an Apple logo.
That was the giant triangle I saw over Phoenix.
That's what it was in
It was a
1998.
new Apple store. Yeah,
in
the Apple store was coming.
So Microsoft did have a tremendous hold on the mobile market, but the argument, and I'm going to defend Microsoft and all the other companies.
Yeah.
The argument was, well, why didn't they just counter it? You really countering?
Why didn't they just?
I
told you this story, right? Did I ever tell you the
No.
single most awful interaction I ever had with Microsoft was over this topic?
No, what was it?
I've told the story a lot, so maybe as I tell it, you might remember this. But between Windows Mobile 6 and 6.5, they were doing little, the iPhone had come out. The Windows Mobile 6.5, for people who don't remember, was basically just 6.3 or for whatever the last one was called.
6.5 was the honeycomb one, right?
Yeah. So all they did was paste a touch-friendly UI on top of the old system. And so the front of it was actually pretty, by the way, there was the one innovation they had was lock screen notifications would appear in a line in the middle. And if you swiped on a notification to unlock the phone, it would go to that app.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you had a phone call, you could swipe on the little phone icon, it would go to the phone app. I thought that was pretty cool. But anyway, the problem was once you got past the Surface level, it required like a stylus, like all the UIs with those tiny little things for the stylus. Anyway, it was a piece of shit. So I was I was visiting Microsoft in California, which is where this stuff was at the time. Microsoft had just done their deal with Palm. Palm had made their first, and I think only, Windows Phone, which was just a version of the Treo running Windows mobile software. I think it was like Treo something W was whatever the model was.
7 something W.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was a beautiful phone, by the way. Very expensive, though. Like, I think in the day, you had a 600, 650, something like that.
Yeah.
You had to buy it outright. But, no one bought phones that way, right? And the notion that someone would have $600 to hand to a carrier to get a phone or however they bought it, it was just so ludicrous. And so this thing never took off. But Microsoft being Microsoft, everyone on this team had one of these phones. And they thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I remember sitting in this conference room, and it was like a square table with empty in the middle, and I was sitting on a corner and the people from Microsoft on the other corner, and I had my laptop open and taking notes, and I'm asking them questions, they're answering the questions. And I said, hey, Apple's kind of eating your lunch here with the iPhone. What are you going to do to counter that? And then the woman, I will never forget this as long as I live. I will never forget this moment because I type pretty quick. You've probably seen it.
Yeah.
And so when I'm in a meeting with somebody and I will kind of write what they're saying, it's sloppy, but I pretty much get down very accurately what they said. And as this woman was talking, as I'm processing what she's saying, I started slowing down And then eventually I just stopped typing and my hands were like hovering over the keyboard. But what she had said was, the iPhone proves something that we here at Microsoft have known for a long time, which is that if somebody made a really beautiful touch-friendly device, consumers would rally around it. And I looked at her and I said, do you even hear the words that are coming out of your mouth? She's like, what? And I said, you just said that Microsoft had the idea for the iPhone, but they didn't make it. Is that what you just said? Because right now the iPhone is out. There's a real iPhone out there and it's selling.
Yeah.
And you're not doing anything about it. Like, are you seriously like trying to take credit for this? I just thought it was like the most clueless response I'd ever gotten to anything. It was just it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard.
Great corporate response,
Yeah. So that team was working on something at the time that was called Windows Mobile 7. It was codenamed Photon, if I remember correctly. And they were all pretty much let go. And this was coincidental to Windows. Sinofsky had taken over Windows. He had booted a bunch of people who were kind of the old school Windows guys from back in the day out. And a lot of them went to mobile and they started up this thing that became Windows Phone. And so a lot of those guys, Joe Belfiore was one of them, by the way, he's still around, Charlie Kindle, Greg Sullivan, a bunch of guys that I knew from the old Windows days were the guys who took over for mobile and got rid of Windows Mobile and started Windows Phone.
So I'm trying to remember this. So from what I remember with Photon, it was it scrolled up rather than side to side, right? It was like,
oh, I don't know anything like don't think too much about Photon. It never happened anyway.
It never happened.
Photon,
yeah.
It was just Windows Mobile. It was Windows Mobile.
But you know what's interesting? So I became a big Windows Mobile fan because of HTC, because they were skinning it. And that was the whole thing about Windows, where you could put your own skin on it.
Yeah.
And I used to go on all these forums and try to find updated skins, and people were doing their own thing. They were doing their own ROMs. And I was dropping.
That was one of the problems that Microsoft solved with Windows Phone, which was there were too many different things, and there were different aspect ratios, different resolutions, different skins. And they were like, we're going to have, at the time, in the very beginning, they had, I want to say they had 3 reference designs, and they were like, this is what we're supporting. You can't make anything else. It's going to be one of these things. And eventually they went to 2, but they had 3 originally. So they were going to standardize it.
To kind of continue on with this, they had the advantage, and to kind of defend all these companies, you can't pivot that quickly if this is almost become institutionalized within your organization, that this is how you do things.
Yeah,
and now you have a disruptor that came in and took a bat to everybody, and now you got to regroup and say, how do I fix this?
Reaction, you got to remember, whoever was anybody in the mobile market at that time belittled the iPhone, right? So RIM and Motorola and BlackBerry's RIM, Nokia, whatever, all of them did not see this threat. None of them saw the threat. By the way, the one company that did see the threat, well, there were 2 actually. The one company that was existing in the market was Palm. Palm saw the threat. And by the way, Palm came out with their own little Windows Phone type, better than the iPhone system, called WebOS, I think, right? The Palm Pre.
Palm Pre. Yeah, Palm Pre.
And they failed for a variety of they basically ran out of money is what happened to them. And then the other company, of course, was Google. And Google was not in the market yet. And so it was easier for them to kind of, not start over from scratch, but recalibrate because of the iPhone. But, these other companies that were successful and were going gangbusters reacted to the iPhone as they had to. They were doing great. Their model worked. This is why Microsoft, the notion that like Microsoft was going to swoop in here and take over the market or whatever is so ludicrous. Microsoft had its own way of doing things. And Microsoft in that day was still very much focused on Windows first, Windows only, Windows best. It was Windows, Windows, Windows.
I think the biggest story in mobile would be BlackBerry. BlackBerry's the bigger story of it falling apart.
And Nokia, yeah.
I mean, it's
they collapsed.
I get it. I get you can't shift that quickly, and when you do, you make mistakes. But there had to have been some sort of.
You don't. You have to understand. Look, there could have been a guy in like Nokia or BlackBerry, some guy. It doesn't matter what, an engineer, a designer, and he sees the iPhone and he goes running up to his boss. He's like, guys, listen to me. We got to change everything. Drop whatever we're doing. We have to do this, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm sorry, but at any point along the chain, there's going to be innumerable people saying, yeah, we're not doing that. we are number one. we are winning. This thing is unproven. It's new. It only runs on 2G. It only runs on AT&T. Everybody hates AT&T. You know, there would have been any number of reasons. It doesn't have the corporate stuff that BlackBerry had, that Microsoft had, whatever. You can make up anything you want to make up. I mean, you don't have years and years of success doing one thing and then just turn on a dime because you think maybe this thing's going to change the world. You just don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, you don't. Remember, it was BlackBerry. Like, their initial response was to do nothing. Hardware keyboards are better. And then they slowly started working on this other touch thing. Like, they had a Storm, I think was the name of one of them.
BlackBerry Storm, yeah.
But remember they had the screen was haptic or something. Like, you could, it felt like you were pressing buttons as you pressed parts of the glass or something.
Well, you know, because what happened, they listened to their core way too much. And their core at the time was screaming, we don't want glass. We want a keypad.
Right. So this is what I mean. In other words, that like Microsoft beating themselves up over the iPhone is ludicrous, as it is frankly, for Nokia and RIM and anyone else as well, because it's just one of those once in a lifetime tsunamis. Like, you could never have prepared for it. You could never have reacted correctly after it happened. It's just a matter of time. Like, you know, this is what happens. You know, it's what happens. And you know, the way the personal computing world has always worked, I think pretty much always, is that there's one main player and then there's one smaller player. You know, the other ones tend to drift off. There are other ones in the beginning. That was the Mac and Windows for a long, long time. It's been Android and iOS since. I mean, it's the way it's gone.
I love that BlackBerry still has phones out there.
Sure. You can buy a product with a Polaroid logo on it too if you want. But
yeah, and that's what it is. Yeah. The key too is
Nokia phones, same thing. You can buy Nokia phones. Everyone thinks they're great. There's no such thing. It's a company called HMD. They just license the branding. Like, doesn't have anything to do with Nokia. It's just, you know, but whatever. I mean, it's fine. I'm happy they're still kind of kicking around in some way. You know, like we were talking about the Amiga and Commodore, that stuff's all gone. You know, it's just gone. You know, any continuation, I guess, is better than none. I don't know.
So we're approaching the end of the show.
Yes. To recap everything we discussed.
I do want to get your opinion. Actually, I do want to get.
Yeah.
I want to get your opinion on the iPadOS.
Okay.
Before we go on, can you do a post show today?
Yeah.
10 minutes. Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Before we go on to that, I do want to get your opinion on this because the people who have started using it the last day really like it.
But why? What's different about it?
That's what I keep asking. So I'm asking
There's nothing. There's nothing.
I have yet to install it.
All right. So quickly, this is what I'll say. When Apple introduced the iPad Pro, it was confusing because, as I recall, if I'm not mistaken, when it first came out, it just ran iOS. So it was just gianter icons on a bigger screen. Like, it didn't really see it. Did they have? I guess they had the pencil probably from day one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But that was about it. Right. So there was no multitasking stuff yet and whatever. And then the next version of iOS, they made these big software advancements around multitasking. Right. And when that happened, I was like, okay, now I got to buy an iPad Pro. I got to check this out, because before it was just like an expensive iPad. I didn't quite see the point of it. And so at that time, I thought to myself, wow, these guys, you know, the way that Apple works is every year they're going to make these changes to iOS. This thing's going to get more and more functionality that one would expect from like a laptop type device. And this will eventually become their platform for consumers over the Mac, right? Mm-hmm. And you could see this future like happening. You could totally see it. And then the next year happened, and they didn't add anything to iOS for the iPad Pro. They didn't change anything. It was kind of bizarre. So flash forward another year, they came up with the latest iPad Pros, and these are the ones that have like the smaller bezels and everything, and USB-C instead of Lightning. And everyone's like, oh my God, see, it's more like a computer. but it really wasn't. It was just a prettier device. It was still running the same software. There was nothing like, yeah, there's USB-C. Great. Now I need a different dongle to do whatever, but I still can't access the file system of a storage device. It still doesn't work like a computer. So what's happening today is with iPadOS, there's a couple of minor jumps. There are some improvements to the multitasking experience. And by improvements, I mean complexities, because honestly, I find this stuff to be incredibly difficult to use. And there's a minor thing around the storage system thing I just talked about, where you can actually read the contents of a storage card like a real computer.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of baby stepping it. So I don't remember what year the original iPad Pro came out, but if you go back that many years, 4 or 5 years now, they really haven't taken too many big leaps forward. The biggest one had come a year later, like I said, whatever version of iOS that was, where they added the multitasking stuff. Since then, there's either been no improvements in iOS, which happened the next year, or minor improvements, which is what we're seeing this year. And what that means is, for the foreseeable future, this thing is not that much more sophisticated than it was last year, because iOS or iPad OS now 13 comes out in September. They're not revving it again until next September. This is what we're dealing with. And honestly, the value prop, versus a laptop has not shifted very much. It's a very subtle shift. So I still feel like this future happens. It's very clear. Apple's kind of signaling to the world by making a new OS, which they didn't have to do, but I think it was a signal that they intend to be more aggressive going forward. So maybe in the future we'll see even more, and so we'll see what happens there. But this release is not dramatic.
Not dramatic.
Other than the stuff that everyone gets, like dark mode is really cool or whatever.
Did you install macOS?
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Not as big as last year's release. Last year to me was the big one because of the dark mode thing, which frankly I think is humongous. Apple does a great job with that stuff. So dark mode
I never use it.
You should look at it, dude. Dark mode in the Mac is beautiful. It's great on iOS as well and iPadOS. The coolest thing that I saw in this new version of the Mac is that sidecar feature, which is an example of Apple stealing from third parties. Right, there were third party solutions that did this, but it's super seamless because of course it is. So you go into what's the control panel called? System settings, or what's it called? The system
preference.
System preferences. Yes, everything has to be named differently on the Mac. Anyway, you go in there to display settings, and there's just a connect to an iPad. It senses it knows what iPads you have.
Yeah.
It sees if any are nearby. Do you want to connect this one? Yes. And which side of the screen do you want it to be on? From the Mac's perspective, you can put the screen next to the Mac, and it's just a second screen. You can drag apps over there, maximize them, whatever you want to do. But from the perspective of the the iPad, you can pick it up because it's an iPad and it's got like toolbars along the sides and you can do things with your fingers. But I mean, I think the big thing here is, aside from the second screen part, which is cool, is the ability to interact with things with a pen. And so one of the big complaints about the Mac is that they don't have touchscreen, obviously. And they do have like pen support, but through third parties. So you can get like a Wacom tablet or something like that.
Yeah.
You can buy an Apple Pencil now and an iPad. You get the cheap iPad, like the $329 iPad, and you can ink on the screen and it's on the Mac. It happens on the Mac. So that's a potential response to the complaints from people who are like, how come you don't do this? And how come you don't do, well, that is how we're doing it. We get an iPad. It's a uniquely Apple way to look at things. Buy another Apple device. That's always solve your problem. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I have to try the sidecar. I had a third party that I was doing that with.
Yeah,
I had like an app that I was able to do that with, and it worked great. I mean, it's a very simple function.
I'm not a dual screen guy, but a lot of people are. And if you, especially like power users, and I think power users would kind of tend to the Mac anyway. You can buy for some, I don't know, $200-300, something like that, like a USB second display, right? And it powers off of your Mac or your PC, and you just plug it into USB support, right? So you could do that. But basically for the same price, it's a smaller screen, because I think the external screens are probably typically like 13 or 14 inches, but you buy like a 10-inch, whatever the small size, 9.7-inch, whatever Mac, $329, $300, whatever it is, and you get the second screen, but you also get the touch and the pencil capabilities. I mean, it's it's actually that could be pretty cool for certain people. I think that's a neat idea.
Yeah. All right, Paul. Let's wrap it up for today. If you're watching this live, stay tuned. We're going to record What to Talk right after this. If you're not, you listen to the podcast, head on over to patreon.com/whatthetech. You could get access to all our bonus stuff that we record each and every week for as little as $1 per week. You could fund us. You can fund us whatever you want. It keeps us going here, and it pays for upgrades and hardware changes and all that stuff. We've been doing the show for almost 10 years now, and hopefully we'll do another 10 years, Paul. Can you imagine doing this for 20 years with me?
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Good. I'm glad. Me too. For all things Paul, go to Thurrott.com. Go check him out over there. You could go to gfqnetwork.com. Subscribe to us. We're everywhere podcasts are available. And, of course, if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're almost at 6,000 subscribers on our channel. Maybe we'll hit 10,000 soon. We're adding a lot of subs on YouTube. It's amazing how people are accessing content differently every couple of years, and YouTube has become a big part of what we do. All right, guys, with that said, we'll see you all next time. Take care. All right, let's pull up this lower third. There we go. Let me see here. So my kids are home because school's over, and my father's watching them, and he's losing his mind because they're both home, which he's not used to. Poor guy. He's asking me. He's like, "When are you done? When are you finished?" All right. I'm good to start. How about you, Paul?
Yep.
All right. Let's do this in 3, 2, and 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome to What to Talk. This is our bonus show. We record this live each and every week exclusively on patreon.com/whatthetech. I'm Andrew Zarin. I'm joined by Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. We had a very nice conversation about Windows and phone. What a concept.
It's not clear if we arrived at any conclusions or whatever, but we were certainly all over the map.
You want to talk about dumb, useless devices? I found one of my old like PC World magazines. We were talking about Byte magazine, but I had PC World and I had all of them. I still have them all because I love to go back every now and then.
Funny. Yeah.
And just go through and see, what the technology was in 2000 and 98 and 99 that people were using. I can't begin to tell you how everybody that I knew wanted those tiny little pocket PCs. Not the pocket PC, but you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It was like
it
was like a little computer and it ran Windows XP.
Yeah, and it had a slide out keyboard.
And it had a slide out keyboard,
There was it was Windows XP, and I there was an X in its name. I distinctly remember this company. I met with them actually in Las Vegas one year. Oh boy,
there were a couple of them, but I remember the first one had like the X in the name.
Yeah.
What a useless device.
Yeah, pointless.
No point in that, right? None whatsoever.
No, but this is what people we suffer from this. Like, oh, it's really cool. Like, yeah, okay, but it's just like we're adults, right? It can't just be really cool. You're asking me to spend $1,000 or whatever it is on this thing. Like, it has to have a point.
Yeah.
It has to do something better than some other thing. That's, by the way, one of the things we talk about this sometimes, like the folding phone thing, right? The folding phone stuff, however they do that, whether it opens up into a bigger screen or, whatever this system is, the potential there is big because there are people like me who are getting older and can't see, and we're out in the world and we need a bigger Google map, or we want to read a book or watch a movie or whatever it is. But this also has the potential to revolutionize the PC in a way, because that type of thing could form the basis of a computer, which, again, I know there are solutions like DeX and so forth that do this today, but you plug the thing in at work or at home and it's a dock and you get a big screen, a keyboard and a mouse, and it becomes like a computer. And I think that this is there. I think that kind of thing is, has got great potential. I mean, and then there are these other ideas where it's like, yeah, but what's the point? Like, it has to have potential. I mean, the potential doesn't always exist, and it being cool is not enough. Microsoft will never make a Windows phone, right? Because the app system, it just doesn't exist. Would Microsoft make an Android phone? It's like, yeah, they could and might, but like, what's the level of success? Like, what's
There
the
were so
point?
many of these useless, concepts
Oh
out
yeah,
there. Um,
sure.
I'll give you a great story. Not a useless concept, a great concept. I always had a capture card on my computer. I was one of
Yeah,
those people. I was really big
yeah,
on this, and I had an ATI All-in Wonder. Remember those?
yeah, yeah. I did too. Yeah, I had one.
Yeah,
Yep,
and I had paid a lot of money for this thing because I wanted to be able to uh, essentially watch TV
of course.
on
Who
my
wouldn't?
computer. Who wouldn't want to do? Who
In a
wouldn't want to
small
watch
screen,
TV like
of
this?
course. This is
Eh,
you're living the dream.
So I bought this thing and I
Hmm.
put it in my compact Passario. Okay, my
Yep.
750 megahertz compact Passario,
Right.
and
Right.
I connected it to the cable box. I got it working. I was blown away by this. My father thought it was the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. That I have
Wow.
TV on this.
Yeah.
Blown
You're
away.
living in the future.
He thought it really was a future.
Yeah.
And it started smoking.
Oh,
It
jeez.
caught on fire. I went right back to Comp USA and returned that thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was exciting in a weird way, right? Because it was all this new technology for different things and different companies, and there was so much like these were concepts that really did not exist. Now we're so jaded with technology. We have an app to do everything.
I know.
Everything is possible. You can watch everything anywhere. Now it really was an exciting moment, that the boom period
Yeah.
for the internet and what we're, as we know it, from 99, 98 on, it was a very exciting time for computing, but there was also many useless types of devices that were out, and they still are. Why do you
Yeah.
need a USB powered fan?
Actually, that's not a horrible idea. But
Or a coffee a coffee
yeah, yeah.
warmer,
A
a
coffee warmer.
USB
Yeah.
powered coffee
Right, right.
warmer. I
I
don't
was
want
just on
coffee
the
near this.
if you go to the Kensington website, I think it's Kensington, right? Those guys that make the security locks, right? They make a bunch of other things, and they have like a monitor stand that's an air purifier built into it, so it's blowing purified air on you as you use the computer. I mean, so that stuff kind of still exists, but I boy, we were talking earlier about the early days, like you were just saying, and if I guess if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have gone in a completely different direction. Like knowing where the world went, I would have gotten on board with that a lot earlier than I did. I mean, I resisted it as long as I could, and by it I mean the PC and Windows and MS DOS, and I it took a long time for me to get over my prejudices against the platform and against Microsoft, and their software and all that. I look through these magazines. We were talking about Byte magazines, like you said, and I see all these things like the Mac was obviously very graphical, and the Mac was great for things like desktop publishing and for graphics, but the Mac was never really that great for video for some reason. Like the Amiga was really good at that. The Amiga had the video toaster and Genlock and all that kind of, and I had a Genlock actually in my Amiga 500, and you'd sit there and ponderously, spinning a color dial, scan something into your computer, or you generate these graphics that would take forever to come up on the screen, whatever. But when I look through Byte magazine, what I realize is, the PC really, and Bill Gates talked about this a lot, was this kind of unbelievable tool that could conform to anything you wanted it to be, and all that stuff, video, Genlocks, graphics cards, external Wacom style styluses and stuff. That was all available like in the 1990, like all of it. Like you would have paid for it. The software might not have been quite as sophisticated, as it would have been on some of the other platforms, whatever. But like that stuff was all happening,
Yeah.
and I wish I had ridden that earlier, because like I said, it took me several more years. I think it wasn't until probably 93, 94, probably 94 more, before I really, and I kind of went kicking and screaming.
You didn't want to make that move.
No, but I had to, I had
Yeah.
gone back to school for software development, and I started working on books, and um, I remember, the Amiga had collapsed and Commodore had gone bankrupt, and I was sort of assessing the industry at the time. I remember I looked at Windows, which was 3.1 at the time. I looked at Windows for Workgroups 3.1.1. My wife worked at a company where they had beta versions of, I want to say it was Word 6, but it was this desktop or word processor that was so sophisticated compared to what I had on the Amiga. It really kind of opened my eyes. And then I got on the beta, for Windows 4 and Office 95. Eventually, it was called, and Plus 95 and MSN and whatever else. It kind of went from there. But eventually that stuff got really good. I just, Visual Basic came out in 1990. I mean, I could have gotten on board
Yeah.
with it then. They had inexpensive languages like Quick C and Quick Pascal and Quick Basic in 1990 or 91, 92, somewhere in there. I wish I had, this is the way, like, your bias gets in the way. Like we were talking on the earlier show about, because of your experience with whatever kind of phone, you looked at the iPhone and said, this is never going to make it. A lot of people said that. All right. I looked at the iPad because of my experience with tablet PCs, and I'm like, this is never going to make it. And, it's experience really helps in some ways, but experience can really be kind of hit you in the wrong way too, right? It can kind of blind you to things because in the same way that it can with companies, because you're just so used to a certain thing being a certain way, you see something else and you're like, this isn't going to work, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny. I mean, we were just talking last week about, why I bring my kids to Europe and I don't want them to react the wrong way to things that are different, but we all, it's very human to do that. It's hard to break out of that way of thinking. I think we all kind of do it to some degree.
Oh, all the time. Listen, it's
Yeah,
a constant. It's just how we're wired.
I think so.
I was thinking about, somebody brought up a great point to me. He goes, even with the show, like in the last couple of years, how much
Hmm.
we don't discuss certain elements of technology
Yep.
at all. It's gone. It's over. Like tagging your MP3s.
I know.
Do
I
you
know.
still have your server?
I have a NAS, and I still have my file. Those music files that I tagged, right, are in at least 3 different places. Actually, that's not true. They're in 2 places completely, and then I have a third place where they're only partially there. But like, yeah, that I mean, I look, I pay for 2 different music services, right? And actually, technically, I pay for iTunes Match as well, so that's not really much of a service, but just to keep that collection going on the Apple side, because you never know, it's $25 a year. So, um, most of the music that I listen to now comes off of a service. In my case, it's the Google service, but my kids use Spotify. Um, I don't, my music collection is like a vestige of the past. I have pulled out a few things here and there because I have music that has never appeared on a service for some reason. Um, but yeah, I don't know. There's probably a lot of people who are your age or my age or older who still listen to music that way, right? But that is so antiquated now.
Yeah.
And when we were we still actively doing this at the time? I don't remember. I think we were talking about it because we had started doing that same thing with photographs, right?
Okay.
I think that's why it came up
When
when you and
years
I
ago?
started talking about, yeah,
Uh,
10 years ago,
uh 10 years. No, I think it
you know?
came up because no, I know exactly why it came up. I was
Okay.
meticulous with organizing my MP3s. Meticulous.
Mhm.
I had to have, at least 128 at the time. I didn't have
Sure.
crappy versions of anything. Everything was
Yep.
tagged
Yep.
properly, cataloged, in folders, I had everything done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For years, I was so crazy about this stuff. I would go and I would delete stuff. I would replace it with better versions.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
it was really psychotic.
Sure.
And I did the terrible mistake of importing it into iTunes and letting iTunes
Yeah.
organize it for me. That was I don't know if that feature still exists because I haven't
Oh, I'm
done it
sure it
in
does. When
God
you
knows how
import it, you
long.
can, yep, yep.
But
You,
what you
you, you can leave
do,
it the way it is, or you can let iTunes organize it, and it does its own little folder structure thing.
and it did the worst thing ever. But what it does, it takes files, separates it from what you did and puts it within folders, within folders, within folders.
Yeah, but you know what? So here's the thing. I'm sure we probably had a discussion something like this, but today I mean we didn't. Today things are a little different. So when you put photos up in, like, if you back up to Google Photos, um, there's obviously location data, and that really helps. And there's other data, but I don't think you don't go in there and add tags and stuff anymore. But when I go into Google Photos and I search for Paris, my pictures from Paris come up. Like, it's
It
kind of
knows. Yeah.
incredible. Yeah. So if I go into Apple Music, or I don't use Apple Music, but Spotify or Google Play Music or whatever, and I search for Van Halen or some band I want to listen to, that music comes up, right? And at some point, I think we have to kind of let go of that weird shit that we used to do. It's like the used to have to be a mechanic to operate a car kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Who gives a crap where it's sitting? Like, I just want to listen to this thing, and the only thing I don't do anything to organize photos anymore. And I don't do anything to organize music other than the fact that I do make playlists sometimes. But I don't organize the music. Like, I don't, worry about where stuff is. In fact, that's one of the things I find infuriating about Spotify, is that for me to use my own music, I have to jump out through all these hoops and actually manage my music again. And it's like, I don't want to manage my music. I want to push it up into the cloud, not worry about it. I mean, the thing that you're talking about, the iTunes organizing it, that's what that really is a predecessor to just put it in the cloud. Don't worry. Like, if you uploaded your music to iTunes Match, you don't ever get to see it in a folder structure. What you see is whatever views that iTunes or Apple Music now gives you of your music. And so you can view them by artist, you can view them by album, you can whatever. And that's how it's organized. You don't care. Are they all in one folder somewhere? Maybe.
But
Is there an
matter.
Andrews folder up in the iTunes cloud? Maybe there
Yeah.
is. I don't know. But I don't care, right? And we shouldn't care.
Listen, for me, I've got the Spotify. I can find anything and everything I pretty much want on there. I have my obscure stuff
that's how you stop caring, right?
That I listen to, but it's not often enough for me to care. And then I'm done. Really, that's really.
Plus, you don't ever want, so we're all so compulsive, right? It's so messed up. When I was using the Zune software, which I really liked, the desktop software, the Zune software was actually really nice. Eventually it was really nice. 2 and 3, I guess. And they, I'd be going on a trip, right? And so I got to put the Zune software would be on there, but I got to make sure I have my full music collection on there, and all the podcasts that I was going to listen to had to be on there. And then you sync the device with that computer, right? And so there would be this process where I would copy everything over, like I would do, load it up into Zune, let it, do whatever it was doing. And then I would go through the music, and certain albums would not have the album art, and that could not stand. And I would manually fix it so that I had the correct album art.
Oh, and then I had all the software that would do that also. I had all the software.
But I would do this every time I went on a trip. I would do it again. I would just keep doing it like a mechanical idiot. Like, I don't know why. Thank God now that you can do, well, Zunes are gone, but I mean, if you have a phone, like, you don't sync it to a software on a computer, you sync it to the cloud. Like, you never do this stupid doofus thing that I was doing where you're manually managing the collection like an idiot. Like, why are we serving the computer? It's crazy when you think about it, but that's what we did. That's what I did anyway.
Listen, we all did it.
I think so.
I have a server that I haven't turned on. I should turn it on. Of photos, videos.
It'd be funny just to look at it,
Just to look at it, just to go through it. I mean, I have most of it local, in the cloud somewhere. I put it in photos or whatever, but I'm sure there's stuff that I've missed. I'm sure there's stuff that I haven't uploaded.
Right.
So, sometimes that's like a cool thing. You find it every now and then. You'll discover something that you were looking for. I just found a photo of your wife shaving your head. I have that saved in Google Photos. I'm looking at this. I'm staring at this right now from January 7, 2015. I have it saved on my phone. Of your head getting shaved. Why did you do it? Do you remember? I don't remember why you did it.
It was some kind of a charity thing. Like, if Leo had pledged to do it, so I said I would do it.
And did he do it?
Did Leo do it? I don't remember if Leo did it, but I remember I did it.
Listen, I'll put it out there. 50 grand. I'll shave my head.
Yeah, 50 grand.
I'll do 50
Sure.
grand.
I would do it for a
And
grand.
I'm saying bald, like with the razor,
Yeah. No, of
like a
course.
man from the future.
Yeah.
I want to look like I'm from the future. I want it like totally smooth. I want like a Joe Rogan look.
Of course.
That's what I'm going for. It's amazing. Everything changes, but you know, it still kind of stays the same at the end.
You can always be compulsive about something.
Yeah. I'm just going through these photos. It's wild. I'm at a vineyard. Like these are stuff that I haven't looked at in years. It's amazing. You know, before you need a photo album. You pulled out a photo album, you sat around, and everybody looked at it. And now it's you don't want anyone looking at your photos.
We have a display in my kitchen that just shows photos, and it's kind of amazing. I noticed that my wife was saying the other day, she's like, you know, this thing seems to cycle through a group of, I don't know, 50 or 100 pictures or whatever. I'm like, yeah, it does, but it changes that group over time. And so I just noticed today, like a bunch of pictures from before my wife and I were probably just first married. We were going out to my dad's place to go skiing, and my sisters were all there before they got married. And it's like these old pictures I've not seen in, you know, many years, whatever. Yeah. It's interesting. That kind of stuff is interesting.
Yeah. It's wild how everything is available now. But you are right though. The fact that Google does a great job in its algorithm at knowing what certain things are in photos.
Yeah. Yeah. I met a guy in DC who worked for AppPoint, and actually you'll appreciate this. I'm walking down the street and there's this pristine Porsche 968. Okay. And most people don't know about this car. This is the successor to the 944, which was hugely successful. My father owned a 924S, which they only produced for like 2 years. And I love this car. Like to this day, if I could find a perfect example of this car, I would buy it. I would love to own this car. It's
a 968,
924S,
24.
But the 968 is the newer version. They built those until the mid 1990s, and then now they're gone. They don't make those kind of Porsches anymore. Anyway, this thing is sitting there in the parking lot. We're just walking by, and I'm like, oh my God, look at this car. So I started taking pictures of it. So the guy from AppPoint goes, do you like that car? And I said, obviously, I'm taking pictures of it. And he goes, yeah, that's my car. And he holds me out the keys. He goes, you want to drive it? I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah, that was his car. So it's kind of a cool moment for him because I'm taking pictures of it. He could tell I loved it. And it's a cool moment for me because I've always loved those kind of cars. And we were talking about cars. And so we kept walking. And I said, the thing is, my dad owned one of these cars. I told him the story I just told you. I said, hold on a second. I pulled out Google Photos. I searched for Porsche. And the picture of my father's car came up from 1987. I go, here's my dad's car. I mean, like, are you kidding me? I mean, like, that's what it's like. I guess I did at one, but that photo is no doubt in a folder called 1987. And then inside the folder, it probably has the date - some event, that was why, my friend Chris was visiting, and it doesn't matter. But I guess I could have found it that way. I just searched Google for it, and there it was.
And it knew,
right?
And it was there
30 years ago.
It's amazing how well it works. It works way better than Photos on the Mac.
Yeah, and obviously Apple's trying to get there as well. I mean, it was goofy at WWDC. I think it was Craig Federighi's up there. It's like, oh, it's like we have our memories on our phones, and it's like, yeah, dude. We've all been doing this for years. Welcome to the club. Yeah. You're not. Yeah, I'm glad Apple just figured it out.
Yeah.
Look, you can search by year. It's crazy. Like, yeah, that's amazing.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at the Porsche now. I like the new ones. I like the new 718s. Their entry
Porsches.
I'm looking at Porsches.
I like the old ones better.
Yeah. I love an old 911 though, with the bug eyes. Love it.
Yeah, no, I get that. Oh, but the 924S and the 944 and the 968 had the pop-up,
Yeah,
pop-up headlamps.
It's crazy how the car, it's one of the few brands that have stuck to its core of what they look like. A Porsche always looks like a Porsche.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what a Porsche looks like. The new ones are beautiful. All right, Paul, let's wrap it up. All right, guys. See you later. Bye-bye. I really... Would you like the 924 better, though? than the, what is the 968?
So the 924, the original 924 was the predecessor to the 944. They had came up with those in the late 70s, early 80s,
Yeah.
and then the 944 happened. There was a 44S, remember the fast one or
Yeah,
whatever.
944s. Yeah.
But in 1987, 88, and maybe 89, they brought back the 24 as the 24S. And to me, it was just a cleaner looking car. It had smoother, it didn't have the bulky
Yeah.
kind of squared up edge. I loved it. I mean, I loved this car.
How'd you fit in it? It looks tight.
No, it's fine. My dad's bigger than I am.
Is he really?
It was fine. Yeah. It had one of those neat, sunroofs that kind of slid off the top.
Yeah, yeah, Targus.
Yeah, really neat.
Yeah, these are cool.
But that's what, if you're into cars, I mean, a lot of times, and the guy from Apple was saying the same thing, like a lot of times the appeal of cars has something to do with some childhood memory or, whatever it is. Like when you see a guy driving around a Porsche and he's like 60, it's something he's wanted his whole life, but it's like only at that time, like he can afford it or something,
Yeah, the 718 is going back to a flat 6 from a turbo 4.
Yeah, nice.
Which is interesting. That's an interesting move for them to make. All right, Paul. I'll see you. I have 500,000 things going on today. Jeez, it's 2:30 already.
Well,
I've gotten nothing done.
Yeah.
I need this day to end. I need a glass of wine. I need the day to end. That's my plan. All right, Paul. I'll see you.
All right. I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye, guys.